Live from the Talking Joe studios, it's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe weekly podcast. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe thought we would last. Talking Joe is there. Fighting each other like a married couple. Our podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there.
Talking Joe is the code name for a completely untrained special podcast force. Its purpose, to produce a regular comic review show while breaking and replacing a series of presenters from across the world.
Talking Joe. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. We are on our soapbox. Nobody seems to care. Fighting for fandom wherever there's trouble. The podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the best and longest running dedicated G.I. Joe comics podcast. This is the second of our looks at the G.I. Joe Disavowed era, the Devil's Due run. Today's deep dive will be into issues 2, 3, and 4 from 2001/2. Stick around for my quiz, Devil's True or Devil's Poo, at the end of the episode, Toy Talk, G.I. Joe merchandise, and the segment that everyone is talking about, well, some people are talking about, well, just me is talking about, it's Innuen-Joe. Now, without further ado, I spy with my eagle eyes my co-hosts. First up, it is a real American kung fu gripping Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hi, Mark. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, you've told us last time that you've gone and told Facebook, so all of Facebook is probably listening to this right now.
I want to apologize to Mark, to your computer's servers, because the overwhelming crush of new listeners that I've brought, all these downloads on Apple and Spotify and podcast. You're welcome. I'm sorry.
Yeah, one of the dials on the computer server exploded because it was so pressurized.
Interestingly, it made a sound effect like from the G.I. Joe cartoon.
Yeah, and the keyboard I use is very difficult because it's just square buttons that just illuminate when I touch them. I'm not entirely sure what they do, but whoever designed that. Anyway, rounding off our crew, and with lifelike hair, it's G.I.J., it's J. Cordray.
Hi, everybody.
He's made it back. That means that he's regular.
I haven't been broken yet.
He's still unbroken, but no longer near mint, unfortunately.
Out of the package for a long time, yeah.
Good to talk to you guys. How has your weeks been? What have you been up to, Tim?
I've been typing my year in review blog post for a real American book. My sort of writing year goes from January to February, or from February to January, rather than calendar year January to the end of December, because I include school vacation. So once a year, middle or end of February, I type a big blog post telling everyone what I've done in the last year for the book, and I'm putting the finishing touches on that and hope to post it Monday. Spoiler alert, COVID was not good for my book writing this year.
Oh dear, because all of that staying in must have been rotten for writing.
This, everyone's had a hard time, subtly and overtly, and other things have taken precedence in daily scheduling, and also sometimes you're just a little sad about the world, and it's hard to work. And I think of this with my students and everyone in creative capacions.
But it's been good for Talking Joe because I've had nothing else to do. So, yeah.
You've been really busy in the last couple of weeks.
I have. I've had a couple of days off on holiday from work, and I've been putting those to good use. And I've been learning all about how YouTube works. And yeah, I've been trying to up my game because our boy Chief Stride has launched his brand new YouTube channel. So check out our social medias to find the link to that. It's called Armageekdom. And yeah, it's Chief doing his things, toys reviews, the splits, etc. And yeah, with that as my my mental competition, my mental high watermark to beat. Having to learn about how YouTube works, how you put together all of the things that need to be done to do that. So yeah, it's been a fun learning process. And yeah, if you are listening to this on audio only, then you want some visuals, you can go over to the YouTube site. All of the links are available at talkingjoe.co.uk, and you can watch along while we share some visuals. We've got the Devil's Due first episode up on YouTube. I've got a flick through my Devil's Due bind custom bound book, and I put up the regular issue as well, Talking Joe episode 112, which was issue 277 of ARAH. Yeah, it's quite fun and an interesting learning experience.
I've gotten some feedback from that the YouTube video that you did for our first episode. Quite a few people have watched it and contacted me about it and said that was really nice. Wow. And really a nice way for people to look at what we're talking about. Like I said, if we don't have the issues, or our listeners don't have the issues in front of them, it's a great way that they can see what it is that we're talking about.
I can also feel conflicted as to whether I should describe what's happening on a page or in a panel for the listeners of our audio versions, or make that information redundant for the people who are watching on YouTube when Mark then nicely uploads an image of that page or panel.
Well, I'd say just don't take it for granted that I'll go to the effort of taking out every single individual image. And yeah, I think by far our biggest listenership is still on the regular old audio only. And, I think it works nicely for podcasts that you can download the episode and go on your walk and listen to some good old Talking Joe on your podcaster of choice. Certainly the way I used to listen when it was Chief and one of his many other co-hosts, that it would be part of my Thursday morning walk to work. I'd listen to the latest episode.
Yeah, definitely audio first. So that's where cater to our audio fans. But yeah, the video is a great bonus. My daughter, I was messaging with her the other night. She's like, I'm listening right now. She said, this is really cool. And I said, well, check out the YouTube. I said, it's got the pictures on it. And she said, well, that's what I'm looking at. And I was like, oh, okay, well, there you go.
Very good.
Yeah.
I let my children know about it, and they showed, let's say, on a level of 1 to 10 for interest, probably 0, just below the minimum.
Well, your dad.
Yeah. Okay, very good. I think I'm ready to talk some comics. Are you guys?
Yep.
Yes.
Let's do it.
We're gonna talk about comics from Devil's Due. It's something you wondered if Talking Joe would ever do. I guess we'll explain it all to you. Gonna take some time to read the books we've never read.
So we are talking Devil's Due issues 2, 3, 4 from the back in the day, 2001, 2002. And who have we got? We've got a creative team, which is layouts and story by Josh Blaylock, pencils by Steve Kurth, inks John Larter, colours are Hi-Fi Colour Designs, edits Scott Whirl, cover A is J. Scott Campbell, back covers from David Michael Beck, and we also have an addition to the team for these issues, which is military consultant SFC Brian Savage Peterson. So FSC, of course, standing for sandwiches and fried chicken, or probably Sergeant First Class. actually.
I like sandwiches and fried chicken better.
Maybe I prefer that, to be honest, as well. Tastier. But back in the day, Brian Savage, he was a very active participant over on the Devil's Due message boards. Certainly in the run up to the big launch, where there was quite a big fan community who were getting very excited about the launch of the new books. And as a military man and G.I. Joe fan and active participant on the fan boards, he was put forward and snapped up as the person to be involved in the book and to be able to help with some of the editorializing of what might be realistic from a military point of view, what's the right jargon, etc. Let's go and have a look at the covers in the gallery. I hope you've got your tickets to this special gallery opening. See them there. Okay, stamp you in and let's go.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
I'll start. So the cover to issue 2, it's a great contrast to the cover to issue 1, and this is a subtle rule that I think comics should follow, editors and cover artists, and often they do, that the cover to issue 2 should be distinctly different from issue 1, so it pops on the stands or it pops in your mind. And this one, issue 1, is all the heroes with the American flag, and we see them full body. This one is some of the villains with Cobra banners. Red and black are the dominant colors, and they're closer to the quote camera. J. Scott Campbell draws a really exciting Destro and Baroness and Crimson Guardsman. Two things about this cover have always irked me. One, there's still some uneven parallel lines in the G.I. Joe logo. I'm looking at the italicized end of the E. But more importantly, Destro's holding Cobra Commander's hood with his fist, and his hand is upward. It's blocked by the logo. And this is a place where you would cut out a little bit of the logo and have some of the image in front of the logo. And I don't know if Hasbro said, no, you can't do that. You can't touch or impede the logo, or if the folks at Devil's Due didn't think of it. But this cover loses a lot of its impact because I sort of don't know what's happening. Well, there's a Cobra Commander face mask sort of floating in front of Destro. I guess he's holding it.
Yeah, I think you're right, Tim. That would look really good if they put his hand in front of the logo. It would look better.
And the Destro redesign is looking pretty good and not too far away from the V1 look. And the Destro is cut off just above his knees, so we don't get to see his great big stompy boots, unfortunately. The other thing is I guess the Baroness redesign, so she's sort of all in black with sort of fur cuffs and collars, as it were. Looking, distinctly like the Baroness, but in a subtly different costume to her regular version 1 look, and no Cobra logo on the chest.
I really like this cover. I think Destro looks really good. Baroness looks really good on this cover. Her face especially is such a welcome change from, what we mentioned last episode about the way Steve Kurth did her on the interiors in most of the panels. I mean, just really, really good Baroness. As far as what she's wearing, I don't know. Is it even a uniform? It's just kind of, here she is. She's got a coat on. I don't even know if I'd call it a uniform or not. It's just clothes that she's wearing, really.
I'm okay with this because I feel like she's not on board yet in the story.
Right.
We're getting the gang back together and some of the bad guys are not convinced. J. Scott Campbell draws very slender women. It's not just cartoonish. It sort of ends up being more than cartoonish, and I think sort of artistically inaccurate and problematic. Really, really skinny waists. I'm thinking of Mary Jane on some amazing Spider-Man covers. And, the Baroness is almost always drawn as an attractive woman. And, she's wearing, her costume is black leather. But here, particularly, that waist is a little thin.
Going back to something that you just said, Tim, about Campbell doing really thin women, I think she looks great everywhere. Looks really good. But if you really look at her fingers, they really are like claw-like. I mean, I'm looking at this on a fairly large screen, and her fingers are very thin, and you know the knuckles are really pronounced, and
it's a little bit like
make that a little thicken those up, maybe.
A bit like the other mother from Coraline, right?
A little skeletal.
Yeah.
But as a contrast, J. Scott Campbell draws sort of these definitive Crimson Guardsmen, right? He gets the helmets right, and those aren't easy to draw. There's sort of a regal quality to them, both from the design and also their poses. You know, it's too easy to use the word badass when describing certain G.I. Joe character designs. These guys have always been badasses, and
yep.
As supporting characters on this cover, they add a great deal of presence.
Yeah, they look great.
Yeah, great cover overall. Shall we skip ahead to David Michael Beck's back cover? It's a kind of mirror image to what we're seeing of the front cover. It's Destro again, posing with a futuristic-looking weapon of some description.
Beck is also contrasting his back cover to issue 1, where the cropping is about the same as we saw Snake Eyes in that painting. Snake Eyes was facing right, Destro's facing left. Snake Eyes had a sword and his logo behind him, and Destro's got a gun, and then the Cobra logo. Is where there's not a lot of light, and so a lot of the image is dark, but not fully in black shadow. But it reads as a character in low light, and none of the highlights are overdone or distracting. Whereas the painting for issue 1's back cover didn't quite land for me, except the sort of overly invented futuristic weapon he's got, which I can get into. This is a great painting. I love this image.
Check out the face on that Cobra. I just now noticed that. That's really cool.
Yeah, Beck is adding some dimension to it so that it's sort of 2 steps less flat and iconic than the regular Cobra logo, and a little bit more ornate and organic and dimensional. It's got sort of a front and a side to it.
Yeah, I think that looks really neat. It'd be very hard to do, like, if you were drawing interiors, you certainly wouldn't want to try to do something like that, or even on a smaller image. But for something like that, it's on the wall, it's a big decoration. That's fantastic.
Very good. So skipping ahead to issue number 3, we've got J. Scott Campbell again, this time with Zartan on his vehicle, which, remind me, Tim, is called...
The Chameleon.
The Chameleon. And I think that was going to originally be Zartan's code name. I think he was originally being mooted as being the Chameleon before they changed it to Zartan. Is it, also called the Swamp Skier, isn't it?
Right. This image, this is sort of the rare J. Scott Campbell for me cover for me that doesn't work once I sort of think about it. From a distance, at first blush, I think it's very exciting. You know, there are some in effect speed lines coming from these blasts shooting past him. His pose is really animated. It reminds me of that scene that he steals in, I think it's the 6th episode of the animated series. And we get him in his element, and we get him on his vehicle, which, you know, love or hate, it's a part of that first toy. I feel like this cover is sort of trying to do too many things, considering how little is happening in it. It's got some sunlight coming through, and he's reacting to it. There's this sort of explosion behind him, and I can't read. I don't know if that's an explosion that someone has thrown at him, or if that's sort of the thrust from his vehicle.
I'm reading that as the thrust.
Okay.
I think that's what that's supposed to be.
The thing that sort of most doesn't work for me here, and I see this in J. Scott Campbell's covers for issue 1 and 4 as well. He sometimes compresses figures a little bit too much to fit a character into a space, or to fit several characters into a space. And something about this foreshortening, sort of how little of his thigh we're seeing, that we don't see one entire leg. I think the anatomy does technically work. I think this composition sort of betrays the pose, and he just sort of looks like he's been squeezed into a smaller space than he should be in. He should be bigger on the cover just a little bit and less foreshortened. I like the idea of this cover. It doesn't work for me.
Yeah, it seems a little cramped.
It's actually sort of echoing what's happening inside on page 3 of the issue, where he is on the Swamp skier with Zanya, and in an interview that I heard with Josh Blaylock, he said that this cover number 3 was quite a frustrating one to look back on, because he only sees what he wanted to have been, which is a cover interpretation of that panel of Zartan and Zanya. But Hasbro said no to that one. They said that Zanya bent over the front of it with Zartan behind him just seemed too overtly sexualized for them. So that is why Zartan is solo on his swamp skier.
Yeah, I don't think that's an image we would have wanted on the cover.
I mean, I think it works probably better, and it's certainly more iconic. But as a result, but there we go. On the back cover, I think we've now got Scarlet by David Michael Beck.
This falls sort of halfway between the Snake Eyes back cover and the Destro back cover. I like the color and the lighting. I think that Beck's rendering of different materials, I'd still like it to have a little more differentiation, sort of how cloth looks compared to hair, so the cloth of a costume, then the cloth of a flag, and then the material of human hair, and then also metal for weapons. Painting is really hard. I cannot paint. I could not do this, and it's easy for me to say, I wish this was a little different. But Beck is experimenting with these characters as he goes. So I like the color and the lighting more than the actual texturing.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of this one. I particularly don't really like the face and hair effects there. Doesn't do it for me, unfortunately. Then moving on to our final issue 4. It's a bombastic action scene there. We've got Flint punching a Cobra trooper right in the face, sort of coming towards us. Something similar to what we might expect to see from a G.I. Joe animated opening title sequence. We've got rock and roll on a minigun. We've got Scarlet doing a high kick upside someone's head. We've got some Vipers in the background. We've got Major Blood there. We've got the White House. We've got Rattlers. We've got parachutists, and down either side we've got headshots of the main Cobras on the right and the main G.I. Joes on the left, and those floating heads are looking much like a Silver Age DC cover of, Justice Society or something along those lines.
Something that J. Scott Campbell, I think he gets credit for, but it's sort of the 6th or 7th thing that people remember they like about his work, is how much personality he draws into characters. I think we get distracted by like how cool Wolverine or how sexy this babe is on a J. Scott Campbell cover. And if you look at these 10 heads on the sides, they're all angled differently, left, right, up, down. They're all making different expressions, and they're all extremely appealing, accurate, and fun. There's a lot of fun in J. Scott Campbell's covers. Unfortunately, this cover is fighting itself, because this valuable space that's given over on the left column and the right column to these floating heads, which is a way to say these other characters are also in this issue, not just the 3 Joes you see fighting Cobra in the scene, means there's much less space for the scene to happen in the middle of the image. And then, you don't want to cover the logo, and you've got the image logo and the barcode on the bottom. I think this cover either wanted to be like a grid of 30 heads and shoulders, or this image with Flint punching and no heads on the sides, so that the scene could have breathing room and maybe a couple more figures.
Yeah, they really lose a lot of space with the heads down the sides, and I don't think that it adds anything. It kind of reminds you of I'm not sure whether it was Marvel's. It wasn't their 70th anniversary. It was sometime during the 80s when they had all the characters surrounding the book. And if you're going to do something...
The 25th anniversary in 86.
Yeah, if you're going to do something like that, I mean, really pack them in there. You know, on that cover, all of those covers, there were a lot of different characters. And it did fill up that extra space. But here you've just got a head and a lot of space, and a head and more space. And it, like you said, it takes away from... cover that they could have used for the actual image of the cover.
Another way to pick up on this idea of more heads or no heads, Jay, is the color behind the heads is this sort of muted purple that has a gradient to sort of a magenta. And if that was white or like bright yellow or like bright orange, then those heads would pop really differently. I think with the color, with that gradient behind them, that's a dark color, the heads sort of they have the same amount of importance as the scene. And so again, in another way, the cover is fighting itself. I don't think the colors did a lot to help this cover.
Yep, you're right.
Interesting. No, I like your point about the personality on those different heads. I think a lesser artist would essentially have a similar template for a face and would just... move around the accessories on that face, like, you know, slightly different haircuts, slightly different, you know, glasses, whatever, but, you know, just to be able to mix it up and have the different angles, the different personality really coming through is as you say, a very cool skill set to have.
Is anyone else seeing Scar from The Lion King on that spirit down there in the corner? It just kind of has that look to me.
There is something very animation about how J. Scott Campbell draws eyes.
Very good.
The Scarlet back cover, is that the one where she's in front of a flag?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good thing that you skipped me on that one.
I don't like it at all.
No, I don't like that one at all.
And then on the back cover of 4, we've got David Michael Beck again, this time with Cobra Commander sitting in a throne, a cobra head throne. And I like this one a lot. I think this is one of my favorites out of the 4. It's got an interesting sort of lighting source, sort of, which is making his hood almost glow. A lot of interesting texture details to it, and a lot of detail behind Cobra Commander's eyes.
I think this is probably the best of the 4. I mean, I've seen this image, you know, floated around online for years, ever since this came out, and I really like it. I think that, like Mark said, the lighting is really good. His pose, his detail, it's really imposing. A lot of times Cobra Commander, they have him be kind of a joke, and whenever you get to see him in a threatening manner, it really works, you know. And this looks like if you were taken in a throne room or something and this dude is sitting here on this chair, you'd be sweating a little bit.
This is my favorite David Michael Beck G.I. Joe image of all. Not just the 4 back covers for this arc, the favorite G.I. Joe image he ever painted. This has become an iconic G.I. Joe image. I think this was released as a poster, and when you Google Cobra Commander, this is one of the images that tends to come up. Everything about this works. There's some really nice subtle detail in the background, which is an afterthought, sort of because it's a cool pose of this menacing figure. But there are 3 spears and a red banner, and it feels Roman, like the Roman Empire. And here we have this leader sitting on a throne. So there's subtext here, which adds to the meaning. The anatomy on the Cobra Commander's right leg, sort of what's on the left, is a little flat for me, but everything about this except that, all the musculature, the various textures, color, lighting. This is the best David Michael Beck G.I. Joe painting ever.
I agree. It's really fantastic.
Very good. Let's move on into the insides of this thing, because it isn't just covers. There's story and all sorts there too. So let's jump in. Destro assumes control of Cobra while Cobra Commander is driven insane and locked away. Destro is revealed to be the real Destro's son, Alexander. The Joes invade the Dreadnought compound but are infected by a nanomite flash bomb that knocks them out. Destro escapes with Scarlet and Snake Eye his captives. Kamakura and Spirit are sent to find Billy to help them escape. Cobra releases a nanomite plague on the US, leaving hospitals crowded with victims, power outages, weapons and supplies disintegrating at military bases. Cobra claims to want to help combat the nanomites and help the people of America. Cobra Commander is rescued from captivity by a ninja-like rescuer with throwing stars. Later, the Joes somehow overhear a phone call where he reveals the satellite that is being used by Destro. Destro's Cobra forces battle the Joes on the White House lawn. With the nanotech defeated, the Joes defeat the remaining Cobra forces. Hawk holds a press conference announcing that the threat is over for now, but the G.I. Joe team will remain in action. Meanwhile, Scarlet forgives Snake Eyes and he re-proposes to her. So it felt like a whole bunch was going on in these issues, reduced down to those that plot breakdown. Where do you want to begin? I'd like to on a broad sweep of these. They seemed like they were trying to fit in an awful lot, and the storytelling just felt a little bit confused. And in particular, the wrap up seemed very jumbled and rushed.
Yeah. So issues 2 and 3 are 24 pages each, and issue 4, it's a supersized issue. It's 32 pages. And as with issue 1, in his layouts, save the splash pages, Josh Blaylock is putting, on average, like 6 or 7 or 8 panels per page, and he's cramming a lot in. There are lots of small panels where someone's explaining something, or there's a vehicle rounding a corner, or some Cobras are launching some nanomites. So there's a density to this which makes these satisfying to read. But issue 2, for example, there are 8 new characters introduced. Oof. And there are, I counted, this is plus or minus 5. There are 49 speaking parts of like marquee Joe and Cobra characters, or characters who don't speak but they're named, like some of the green shirts. And this is, it's too crowded. This may not be a fair comparison, but I think just from a writing standpoint, this is maybe a helpful one. In the newest issue of the monthly G.I. Joe, issue 277, it is a self-contained issue. It's 20 pages, and it spotlights one Joe. And he takes down 4 or 5 Cobras, and we see 3 other Joes sort of say hello to him at the beginning of the issue. But the issue is just this one guy and his sidekick who doesn't speak, just solving a problem, right? Like trying to find some bombs and trying to find some Cobras. And it's a very different exercise to put actually more than 50. I think by the time you include like the jugglers and the reporters and the politicians, there are probably 80 speaking parts in these 4 issues. What this actually feels like to me, and I don't know if Josh Blaylock did this on purpose, what this feels like to me is this is a 5-part miniseries for the TV show in terms of how quickly you can cut from place to place, character to character. You can have some talking heads on the news, jump ahead the narrative, and there's sort of a shorthand for sort of who wants what. It's like, well, these are the good guys, and so they want stuff, and here are some new guys, and everyone's got like one line to demonstrate their like shtick. So too much is going on.
I believe that this was initially announced as a 4-part limited series before it was then extended to be a regular series, and it does to some extent feel like the writer is trying to just throw everything he's got, use every single character, really drain the well of his ideas for G.I. Joe and cram it into those four parts, which is why it is potentially so dense and also seems to end so abruptly because, it's written with those 4 parts in mind and possibly not what issue 5 might be.
I think there's a lot of things that could probably be left out. That, I agree with Tim that a lot of it does seem really cramped, and especially when we get to the battle in issue 4. I think that you mentioned this last time, Tim, that in the battle scenes, you don't get a lot of... There's too much close-up. You don't ever pull back and see where things are from the bigger picture, except for like the very first panel when the Cobras are attacking. And all throughout the battle in the last issue, you're right up on the characters, and it's hard to tell who's where in relation to other characters. And I think you're right; things just move too fast. But like I said, there's things that could definitely be left out. I think a lot of the stuff with the jugglers, there's a scene where they're questioning Hawk and basically belittling him and saying, "Well, you just manufactured this to get your old war buddies back together." And I feel like, why is that even in there?
There's something else that's happening here which doesn't work for me. There's a mean-spiritedness to this. The Joes have these new support soldiers, green shirts, and a bunch of them are named, like first name, last name. And in the letters page, we're told that some of them, in the future could become like fully fledged Joes, not just like anonymous guys in green uniforms. And so the old Joes meet a bunch of these new green shirts. And this is after issue 1 when Hawk and Duke lecture a bunch of these new recruits about how tough G.I. Joe is. And then immediately a bunch of these green shirts are maimed and killed. Like,
right, yeah.
Like eaten alive by alligators or crocodiles and just shot. There's an ambush at a highway checkpoint, and they just get shot by Major Blood and some Cobras on a hiss tank. And I think we all need to be very judicious in how we injure and kill G.I. Joe characters, because someone else is going to write this comic after you, and I think there's a little bit of this like, G.I. Joe hasn't been serious enough up until now. I'm going to make it serious, or the stakes have been low. I'm going to raise them. And I'll do that by killing characters. And even if they're sort of anonymous characters, but then you have this problem. It's like, well, I only met these anonymous characters 20 pages ago. And was there really enough buildup for me to care that they're now dead? So it comes across as thin.
Yeah. And you can get away with it if you've got a Cool Breeze or a Mangler and you're building up their character over the course of almost 20 pages before you then kill them. But when they're anonymous and they maybe haven't even been introduced at all, or at best over the course of a couple of panels, it's just completely throwaway and it doesn't really count for anything. And I thought initially you were talking to the point of where you're talking about the Joes getting mangled was that training sequence where the likes of Jinx is sort of showing off her skills by beating up some of these green shirts. There's an off-panel scream from one of them when she's showing off her moves later on. It's some of those sequences I think could quite easily have been left on the cutting room floor, and the series probably would have benefited for it.
I agree with what Tim said. I think the word that comes to mind is callous. I actually made note of, I think it's in the 4th issue, when they get to the checkpoint and Major Blood and the Cobras have a bunch of, I don't even know if they're green shirts or not, they're just guys at the checkpoint, and they round them all up, and Blood just shoots one of them in the head, and I was like, wow, Major Blood just like off that guy. And then earlier, when we have Zanya and Zartan return to the gas station, and the gangbangers are in there, and they're like, oh, we got to get out of here, and she just blows them away. It's like, kind of like what you said with Cool Breeze and those guys. You're introduced to them, you give them a little bit of character. When they die, it does mean something, but when you're just wiping out characters, that don't really mean anything, it like I said, it just feels kind of callous.
I have another sort of overall comment on this arc, and I have thought about this since issue 1 was published, and that is nanites or nanomites. microscopic robots that can, like do surgery and repair red blood cells, or in this case, incapacitate soldiers and civilians and politicians, or like take apart someone's clothing and their equipment, or also them, right? There's a scene in, I think, issue 4 where a Cobra soldier just gets disintegrated before like Zanya's eyes as Destro demonstrates his power.
Yep.
I have a big problem, and I have had since September 2001 when these comics were published, with nanites in comics. Comics are a visual medium. You should show, not tell. And it is very hard to show in a comic something microscopic. I mean, you can, right? The last page of issue 2, or sorry, the last page of issue, is it 3? Clever Commander's going crazy. Yeah, the last page of issue 3, we sort of zoom away from a satellite in orbit to Cobra Commander who's jailed, and we close up on his eye, and we see little gray dots in his pupil. And then the final panel is this like very angular, exciting, sci-fi, vicious-looking like metal robot, which is one of the nanites inside him. There's an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation where nanites take over the Enterprise, and nanites play a major role in G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra. When you have minutes and minutes and minutes for scenes to play out, and you have a big visual effects budget, and you can show the Eiffel Tower disintegrating and falling over, you have the power to make microscopic enemies compelling and visual. In this comic, like, yes, we see them. We see some close-ups of these robots. There's no drama in it for me. It's like, well, these old Joes who I feel sorry for in issue 1, like my favorite characters, they're stuck in a hospital bed in issue 3, and Lifeline is really sad that they're not going to make it. And with a push of a button, Destro makes a Cobra guy disintegrate. It's a shorthand for, like, I need a very quick, efficient way to hold the entire country hostage and take over government, and it doesn't work.
I had a question too about, they reference this a couple times about the nanites, about people would say like, well, he doesn't understand what they are, or about Destro reverse engineering, and I almost got the feeling, and this is kind of a story point, that I was like, well, who designed the nanites? Was this something Dr. Mindbender came up with? I felt like there was it was unclear, really. Like I said, there were a couple spots where, someone would say, oh, like I said, we don't understand what we're doing, or we're trying to reverse engineer these. If you didn't make them, or if you did make them, why are you trying to reverse engineer them? Where did they come from? I don't know. Maybe that's something that gets resolved later on in the series. Or I'm just reading that into it, but I felt like that was an unanswered plot point.
Yeah, I think some of those type of components were quite confusing. Just the mechanics of how the nanites were supposed to work and how they were controlled and where they came from was all a little bit rushed and hard to follow. It might have been that they were designed originally by the actual Destro Senior, who's incapacitated, and so Destro Junior has got access to them and therefore is able to control them but doesn't fully understand it all. Potentially something like that. There was a lot of exposition going on, so it might be that it's covered more explicitly there. But I was somewhat losing heart wading through some of the dialogue heavy exposition, to be honest. So I wasn't paying as much attention as I might otherwise if I was fully on board with it.
Speaking of dialogue-heavy exposition, Mark, in issue 2, on page 9, Duke has a big talking panel. There are 3 giant word balloons. The first word balloon has 67 words in it. And there is a rule in comics, which I got from Stephen Grant. Stephen Grant is, I don't know him personally. I read it in one of his online columns 15 years ago. But he's best known for writing the initial Punisher miniseries in 1985, I think. And the rule is, I think it's that a word balloon shouldn't have more than 50 words. But I might even be misremembering that. It might be like shouldn't have more than 30. Again, I think some of these choices are coming from a new writer. Like I'm going to have my characters explain this stuff, or the entire first page of issue 4, the final chapter, is 5 really good drawings of city skylines as we see like what I think is Chicago and some other city and some other city and some other city. Yeah. And there are 3 or 4 like electronic filtered narration boxes over each one, it's like we're reading what newscasters are saying as they're describing this mysterious nanite attack. And is that the first page you want a reader to be greeted with? It's like you can have a recap page. Marvel does that nowadays. You can have a splash page. G.I. Joe did that in the 80s, right? The first page tended to be a splash page. There were some issues where the first page was a couple panels. You turn the page, and then 2 and 3 was a double splash with the title and the credits. Do I really want like anonymous drawings of city skylines and like 15 narration boxes of newscasters telling me what's happening in this comic?
Honestly, when I was reading these, I read 2 and 3 and I got to 4 and I hit that splash page with all that text and I just thought, I'm going to stop and read this another time. It does. It blocks the action. You know what I mean? And that's the first page on that issue.
Yeah, it's a major turnoff, isn't it?
As for actual sort of plot and character, at the time I didn't like this introduction of Destro's son. It's a surprise. It's a reveal, right? We see Destro. No one thinks it's not Destro, and then we realize it's someone else, and we see the real Destro, like in a hospital bed. And it's like I said on our last episode together, it's such a bummer to have these characters older and less, young and exciting. It's like, I don't want to read about G.I. Joe characters retiring or being sick. I want them to go on missions and save the day or threaten the day. But as a dramatic and character beat, having Destro, create a kid with someone who's not the Baroness, and that kid shows up, that's interesting to me. I think the idea of Hawk joining the Jugglers is a good one. Jay, you're right. It takes up too much space in this very short arc. I also don't think the concept of the Jugglers is properly explained for new readers in issue 1, or that scene, I think it's in issue 4 when they're giving him a hard time that you referred to. Mm-hmm. And one of the Jugglers just calls themselves the Jugglers. And with the 3 of us, we're like planning, I don't know, some like bank robbery. I don't know that I'd be like, well, Mark and Jay, us talking Joes are sure going to get all the money from this, it's like, no, you're like a certain subcommittee or secret cabal of Pentagon generals. You don't call yourselves by your name.
It's a nickname, right?
At the end of this episode, we'll have a poll where we can decide what our super villain team name will be when the 3 of us go on a bank robbing spree.
So, yeah, in terms of that mention of the Destro reveal, let's talk about that a little bit. That I think that was interesting, and I understand that part of that reveal for Destro's son being black was a callback to the voice actor and I guess portrayal of Destro in the cartoon, where it's ostensibly he was voiced by a black guy, I believe, and a lot of people assumed that he was, and were quite disappointed by the reveal in the comics that he was just a white Scottish dude instead. So I think it was sort of having a little bit of fun and service to that point.
At the same time, there's a thing that happens twice. It happens in issue 1, and it also happens again in issue 2, where a woman who's disappointed with a man smacks him. In issue 1, we're catching up with Scarlet and Snake Eyes, and he jilted her. And she slaps him, right? Which is just out of character. Also, he's wearing his mask, right? So I don't think you do that, right? The point of smacking someone is you actually like your hand touches their cheek and it really stings. And then in issue 2, the Baroness slaps Destro. I guess it's Destro Jr. And I don't think this is how you write women characters.
And it's also, again, someone slapping someone with a face mask.
Right. Yeah. I feel like if I was in my early 20s and I was writing a comic, I might make this choice. And then years later, I might write this very differently, because it's much more interesting to have characters, talk through feelings, or you have a character walk away and you sort of leave the reader wanting more. Like, okay, as a comparison, help me out. I forget what issue number it is. I want to say it's in the early 30s, but it's the scene where in the Marvel run, the Baroness and Destro, I think they're like underground in a sewer, and he hasn't sort of opened himself up to her, and she says something like, talk, all you do is talk. You've never shown me how you feel. And then he takes his mask off, and is it Frank Springer? I have a
feeling it's Vosberg that.
Yeah. Okay. So if it's Vosberg, then it's earlier. It's not in the 30s.
Yeah. So it's probably like 19 or something.
Thank you.
Tin Hut. Fact-checking Joe here. Mark was thinking of the Vosberg issue, number 14, where Destro confronts Baroness in a sequence underneath Cobra headquarters. A similar sequence plays out in issue 33, when Destro actually removes his mask. Tim was correct. This issue was illustrated by Frank Springer. Stand down and rest easy. Fact-correcting Joe, out.
Destro takes his helmet off and he drops the mask. And I forget if they kiss or they hug or the scene just sort of pulls back.
Right? She swoons, faints.
Okay, thank you. This thing where 2 issues in a row, an upset woman smacks a man in the face. Oof, no.
Definitely doesn't pass the Bechdel test, does it?
No, and G.I. Joe it has a hard time with that anyway, because the gender ratio is so out of balance. But yes.
I had a question, maybe it's not really a question, again, about the Baroness and some of her motives and actions. There was a scene where Snake Eyes and Scarlet are being held in the prison, and Lillian comes over, and basically that's where the reveal is that Alexander is Destro's son, is her telling those two.
Oh, good grief, yeah.
Which you're like, I was like, why is she telling them this? Okay, and then the Baroness comes over, and there's a panel that I have no idea what's happening. I couldn't tell whether Baroness threw a jar of strawberry jelly at an Iron Grenadier's face, or if she was supposed to have shot him. His visor busts open, all this red gooey stuff flies everywhere. And then she starts talking to Lillian, and I'm just kind of like, I'm totally out of the conversation, because I'm thinking, what just happened to that Iron Grenadier? And why is she just either 1, walking up to someone and shooting them in the head, or 2, throwing a jar of strawberry jelly in their face? I had no idea what was going on there.
Okay, I've got this one. So in a lot of the shots, it has, I think, been established that the Baroness is hanging around drinking wine out of champagne flutes in some instances, which is a little bit unbecoming, but never mind that. So I think we can extrapolate that yeah, she probably had a glass of wine in her hand, which she's either thrown an Iron Grenadier's face and made it explode,
that makes a little more sense.
Or a wall next to him, but yeah, it does seem to be hitting him.
Yeah, I had no idea what was going on there.
The scene also is distracting, because there's no reason for Armada to explain all of this backstory to 2 Joe prisoners, right? Why is she doing it? She's doing it because I don't know, and I'm reading the comic, and someone needs to tell me. And we sort of went in popular fiction. We went through this era, like James Bond movies in the 70s, where like he's tied up and there's a laser pointed at him, and the villain like explains how he's going to die and what the plan is. And then when James Bond gets out, he can stop him. And then, 20 years later, you sort of have the reversal of that, where, the villain sort of jokes about how they're not going to explain it.
Yeah.
And then they do anyway. And I feel like in a lot of sort of popular fiction, as storytelling has gotten more grown up and sophisticated with cable TV and streaming services, I feel like nowadays this scene would happen where the hero's in jail or tied up and there's a laser and the villain says like goodbye and just walks out and doesn't explain it, because either we sort of all get it, or like the villain already explained it to a different villain 3 scenes earlier, and you don't need to tell the hero.
The Baroness does sort of say, "You disgrace the name Destro. Why are you babbling this information to these two?" She's almost pointing out that it makes no sense for you to be monologuing and telling them the entire plan.
And that actually makes it worse, because now I feel like the writer is sort of admitting the mistake as opposed to just not making the mistake. The scene gets a little stranger because Snake Eyes has like a piece of C4 that he's been hiding in his mouth, and Scarlet has a detonation cord like as her hair tie, so they can like blow up the jail cell and get out. And then on the next page, after they blow up the jail cell, she hugs him. And she just seems so relieved and happy and joyful. And it's like, wait, weren't you really upset with him like 2 issues ago? I know you two almost just died because you've been in jail. And the bad guys like caught you in a really embarrassing battle where the good guys lost. And then the final page of this panel, right after she hugs him, there's this silent panel where she's looking left and he's looking right. And it's just a like cool pose panel that doesn't sort of continue the story beat. I think the idea is that they're like looking around a corner because they're guards down the hall. The art overall, separate from like, Steve Kurth's anatomy, the art in this comic is that sort of exciting, flashy, a little bit quote hot, 90s, 2000s style, right? There are more details, there are more lines. There's less in the sort of heavy, like Will Eisner shading that you'd expect from like G.I. Joe issues in the 50s, 60s, 70s issues. And a panel like this, it's sort of betraying this style. It's like, I need something on this page to look cool so that when the original artwork sells, it's not like the backs of heads and shoulders and hands typing. It's like one panel that acts like a splash, one panel that acts like a cover.
There's a lot to get into with these few pages. Backing up just a little bit, Baroness comes in and she says, "Why are you babbling this information to these two?" And then she walks up to the cell and she says, this is the first time that the Baroness has been in contact with, especially Snake Eyes and Scarlet, since this whole thing starts. She walks over and she just says, "She's right, though. You'll both be dead by morning. Try not to lose any sleep over it." Oh, that's it. Baroness walks away and Scarlet says, "Okay, pressure's on. We've got to get out of here." There's a lot of history with these characters that is just seemingly forgotten. Baroness shot Scarlet in the head. Is that all just forgotten? Scarlet doesn't say anything really to Baroness in this scene. You would think that, at the very least, she might try to jump at her through the bars, how you would see, arms reaching through there. Baroness backs up and, maybe laughs at her and says, "Oh, I didn't finish the job that time. You're done now." But all that's just forgotten. And that was the first thing that came to my head, because that's such an iconic panel where, Scarlet's head is off panel, but you see the Baroness and it's blam, and the lighting is perfect. I think it was Mark Bright that drew that issue. And it's like, that's just not even referenced. It's like that never happened in this comic. And then jump back ahead to what you guys were saying about, and this is just a little art nitpick that I have. They're in the cell. It's just the two of them. Snake Eyes doesn't have a mask on. And this is a complaint I have later. They get out. They're getting ready to go. And all of a sudden, his face is all wrapped up. And I just kind of felt like, why? Why did he wrap his face up? I mean, who's that for? Scarlet's obviously seen him without his mask or without any kind of mask. All they're going to be encountering is bad guys. Wouldn't the psychological trauma or shock of seeing somebody with a messed up face, which I don't think that he has at this point, be better than, "Oh, I'm going to wrap my face up so I don't startle any cobras"?
I think it's so that he can remain anonymous. I think the story logic.
It's for the readers.
That. But you're right. Yeah, you're right.
It's mostly for the readers, isn't it?
It's,
to make them
it's
look
cool. Yeah, it's cool for the reader. I think that having Snake Eyes without any scars on his face for this arc really diminishes his character. You know, in the Snake Eyes trilogy, issues 94, 95, 96, plus the prologue in 93, in the Marvel run, right, Snake Eyes gets his face fixed, and then immediately Baroness or one of her cronies throws hot ash on his face.
Yeah.
And so the implication is that he's sort of re-injured or re-scarred all over again. And I don't know that we ever get after that, maybe in 144, but a lot of that's flashbacks. I don't know that we get a really good view of Snake Eyes' face in the Marvel run after that. But to me, even if he's had reconstructive surgery, there still should be some scarring, because that's just so much a part of his character. And yes, this is a couple years later, and maybe he's had even more reconstructive surgery. It's like Anakin Skywalker has that little scar near his eye in is it the second of the prequel movies, right? And like, I wouldn't want there to be some story before episode 3 where he like gets it fixed. It's like, no, this is informing my sense of this villain, and this is why he wears a mask, right? It's like, no, Snake Eyes is scarred. He needs to be scarred.
Yeah, I mean, we do see quite a lot of Snake Eyes unmasked in the 140s in G.I. Joe when they have they have that crazy title. I can't remember what it is. It's like the Electric Boogaloo down at the Silent Castle or whatever it is.
Slam Dance at the Silent Castle.
That's it, the Slam Dance. And that most of that mission he's unmasked, and is, depending on who is drawing it, either looks fairly normal, as in unscarred, or with some scarring to his face. And it's not clear from this, because, you know, a lot of the time he's sort of shown in shadow, whether they are intending him to be appearing to be scarred, but it's just not shown, or whether he is fully okay. And I don't know if that reveal on the very last page of issue 4, where he's proposing to Scarlet, and you see his face and he's looking, very much like Duke, all American blonde guy with no scarring at all, whether that is intended to be Snake Eyes' face, or whether he's showing whether he's wearing a mask. Going by the art, there's nothing there to indicate that it would be a mask. So the obvious conclusion that you would draw is that he doesn't have any scarring, and maybe that's kind of a part of a reveal, that the reason that we've seen him being shown, back of his head, mask covered up, in shadow up to that point, means that we don't fully know what the status of Snake Eyes' face is, and maybe that last panel is meant to, as well as it being the big proposal, is a kind of reveal to say, aha, look, Snake Eyes' face is looking completely normal.
I think it almost has to be a mask on that last panel. Otherwise, like this page that we're looking at right now, why would you have him all wrapped up if his face isn't messed up? There's several panels throughout here where you see like half of his face, and there looks like no scarring. So I don't know. Like I said, I felt that Snake Eyes' appearance was inconsistent throughout.
How do you two feel about the proposal and the final page? As G.I. Joe readers, also as the end of this miniseries?
I could have done without it.
Could have done without it. It seems a little bit unsatisfying. It doesn't really address the underlying reasons why Snake Eyes jilted Scarlet in the first place, and maybe it just wraps it up a bit too quickly and
it was forced.
Easily forced. Yeah. If I knew that all I had to do was smuggle some C4 in the palate of my mouth to make my upset partner forgive everything, I'd know what to do. But I don't think real life works quite that way.
What was the moment you knew? Well, we were in a cell and he had C4 in his mouth, and I just knew that was the guy for me. Yeah.
I had det cord.
Right.
Sugar and spice.
Yeah, I think that squeezing that in there was just kind of, give them an issue, give them more space to work this out, like Mark said. Maybe not necessarily a whole issue of their own, but at least have an issue. Like Larry used to do this a lot. He would have 3 or 4 plots going on in the same story. You'd have 2 or 3 pages. I think it was number 36. You had 2 or 3 pages with Scarlet and Snake Eyes on the ferry or between Staten Island, and then you'd jump to somebody else, and then you'd come back. Give them a little more it just seemed like, especially for the first arc of coming back to the property, you introduce them as, oh, he stood her up, she's mad at him, they're in a cell, they reconcile, at the end he proposes. Yay, it's like tying a bow on it, and it doesn't seem like it's, I don't know, it's too soon to do that.
Should we talk about the elephant in the room? Should we talk about my letter in issue 3?
let's talk about that.
Yes, let's
get to it.
All right, so for our listeners, I alluded to this in our previous Disavowed episode, and Mark thought we might talk about it, and I said, no, let's wait. I read issue 1. I was really upset. I'm a big G.I. Joe fan. I think issue 1, and to an extent all 4 issues, are the 2 problems is I think they're not great comics. They're also not great G.I. Joe comics. So I wrote a letter, and I think I emailed it. I mean, I remember sitting at my kitchen table typing on my laptop, and I looked for the letter after our last episode. I looked both in my sent folder from fall 2001 and also the folder on my hard drive of where I keep letters, and I do not have it. But I remember I was pleasantly surprised when it got printed in issue 3. I appreciated that they were willing to print a negative letter. I was disappointed that they cut it in half because my letter was just a list of things that were problematic. And the specific that I remember is I called out 1 or 2 pages and panels where Steve Kurth had drawn really poor anatomy in faces, right? Like cheekbones and lines on faces that don't correspond to like muscle, shadow, or skin. And to his credit, the editor ran the letter, and when they cut it in half said, I shortened your letter because, we get the point. And, don't let it be said that we don't print negative mail.
Do you want to read the letter as you, and then Jay can be the editor responding to you? and you can read the letter in this voice, wah, 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 if you want.
Dear Devils Do, reading the new book upsets me because there are so many little things your team is not getting right. I was hoping all of you could fill the large shoes left by Larry Hama and the artists of the Marvel run. Unfortunately, you are not up to the task. This book has pretty covers and ugly interiors. It's a good premise and a mediocre execution. I'll keep buying, but I'm not satisfied. Tim Finn.
And the editor says, I edited Tim's letter down for space reasons, but this was the basic gist of what he was trying to say. Let it never be said that we won't print negative letters. And they do go into a little bit about, we make no claims that we're better than Larry. But what I thought was funny, and I just noticed this a minute ago, the very next letter is even more harsh than Tim's. The very first line, the guy says, please stop printing this comic book. It has caused strange feelings to wash over me. And he says, if you care anything about another human being, you'll stop printing this comic book, which I had laughed out loud when I read that. It shows you the reaction that people had to this.
Doesn't the letter, though, isn't that an ironic beginning? Because the final line is, if not, you may have a crazed Joe groupie on your hands that will demand an ongoing series. Do you really want that?
Yeah, I think he was saying that he was enjoying it. That is,
really?
Yeah, it's just causing him to walk around singing the G.I. Joe theme tune. And
I've thought about this. I've had 3 or 4 letters printed in comics. I got a letter in an issue of Black Panther, and I got a letter or 2, I forget, in the modern IDW run of G.I. Joe. And a lot of this goes back to after issue 95. I wrote a 9-page letter to G.I. Joe. Because I
9 pages.
And half of it is just me saying how great Mark Bright's art is. And I showed it to my brother, who's a wonderful person, and he said, that's really long. I wouldn't send it. Because he thought, they don't want to read a really long letter, or they're not going to print a really long letter. He wasn't being mean or dismissive. I think he was just being sort of realistic. These editors are busy. And I did not send it. And I have always had a small regret. I don't know that it would have gotten printed, but this connection that readers feel to properties and creative teams is real, and the letters page in comics is a big part of that. And I thought, since this letter got printed in Devils Do issue 3, do I still feel this way? Am I embarrassed that I have this negative letter in this comic sort of out there for all time? And being able to talk about it on this episode is actually wonderful. And being able to talk more specifically about what's working and not in the comic with two other people who are thoughtful about it is wonderful. Basically, I still agree. I now know more about how hard it is to make a comic, particularly a licensed comic, but I don't think the people involved were quite ready.
Yeah, because, I mean, Josh Blaylock was, 21, 22, something like that, a young guy. I feel a little bit sorry for him, having all of the
big task.
vitriol. It was, it's such a huge undertaking, and particularly given their young ages, that they've done something, regardless of some of the flaws with it, that they secured the license, that they got this deal with Image, that they put out the book, kept to regular scheduling, they got this incredible cover artist on board. They put together a package which, has got flaws, but is entertaining and has got some high points within it, and everything else surrounding that they were able to do that and pull it off and to get it into a regular ongoing book. Hats off to it. And I wonder how much some of these things might have made them, taken a little bit personally. It's hard to say.
Also, the book did improve.
It certainly did. Just getting back to your letter, though, there's a couple of things that I'd call out. Firstly, hoping you would fill the large shoes left by Larry Hama. There are some large shoes in the book for sure. There's Destro's big stompy boots, so I think don't cast aspersions about the large shoes. They've got that covered. And the second thing I was going to say was that you said, I'll keep buying, but I'm not satisfied. But you didn't, did you? You stopped.
I bought until issue 10, and then I had really had enough. The fill-in issue for issue 5, I was ready for it to be different, self-contained. What has Duke been up to before this arc? Getting Mike Zeck on covers for the second arc, excellent idea, and the art's going to improve. But ultimately, the book made me unhappy, and I found it boring. And so I stopped reading it. And I'm a crazy G.I. Joe fan, and you have to do a lot to get me to stop buying your G.I. Joe thing. I will point out that I think it's in issue 4. There's a letter where someone, I think, is obliquely referring back to my letter and says, I'll never understand why someone would buy something that they don't like. And that's, I think, actually a big part of comics fandom, which is, yeah. I mean, how many people do you know, some comic, right? Teen Titans or Punisher. It's like, well, I haven't really liked it for 3 years, but I'm still buying it, right? Because these characters are so important to us, and we're eternally optimistic that a different writer or artist or editor will come on and the book will get different or better, or it'll somehow recapture some magic. I think part of why I was upset with Blaylock and his team is that I was actually mad at myself, because a few years earlier, my friend and I, one afternoon, just had a fun drawing exercise where we redesigned a bunch of G.I. Joe characters. This was, after the Marvel book was over, so there was sort of no G.I. Joe out there. And we were trying to have the characters look enough like the original versions, but also update them. And that's what's happening in the Devil's Due run. And, Blaylock went out and got the license. And to whatever extent Hasbro will let him, he can do whatever he wants. Once you've decided not to hire a certain writer and to use yourself, all bets are off. I think part of why I didn't like it is that I would have made some of these same decisions, and they're not the best decisions. So I think I was actually a little mad at myself, because I would have done this too. I might have, if I'd gotten the license at that age, dedicated the first issue to Larry Hama, but not hired him, because well, he's out there, but now it's my turn to tell G.I. Joe stories. I'm a big fan. I can do it.
Yeah, I've said it a couple times, probably more than that. The problems we have with the execution or things that we might have done differently, I give these guys all the credit in the world for getting the license and going out there and trying. And, the editor, in response to your letter, says that they're doing it to the best of their ability. Maybe that's true at the time, but they did it. They went out there, they got it, they did it, they put it out. Whatever we think about it, that's either here or there. But real quick, right back to the editor. The last line he says, I'll have to respectfully disagree with you about Steve's curt art. not taking anything away from anyone who worked on the Marvel series, but you haven't seen issue 3 or 4 of our run yet, and this is to you, Tim. After you do, let me know what you think. I think Tim's letting us know.
Kurth did get better. In 3 and 4, I see a lot of faces.
He did.
Which I think he's looking at Brian Hitch's work in The Authority and The Ultimates. Steve Kurth is getting better. There's still a lot to be done, though.
It talks to the fact that he's clearly a new artist and he's not got a lot of work behind him at this point in time. But there's a massive organic change over the space of just these 4 issues, and issue 4 looks incredibly different to issue 1 in terms of the art, the angles used, a lot of the composition, and the way that the faces and lips and cheeks look. It's almost a different artist in places. You'd be hard pressed to say this is the same artist as issue 1.
I think the coloring isn't doing Kurth any favors. Hi-Fi does, modern comics coloring style work. I don't really agree with it. They're the new colorists on Usagi Yojimbo, believe it or not, after Tom Luth retired from being cover color artist for like 30 years. And the new series, all the pages inside are in color. There are too many gradients on faces and scenes where someone's like inside a lab or inside a prison or in front of a computer monitor. There's just too many colors, and it's too busy, and busy coloring on top of very active penciling on top of very busy inking. There are very few pages where my eye has any place to rest, and there's a critical mass to this comic where every panel has a bunch of pages because Blaylock is cramming a lot of story, which is kind of awesome, and a lot of panels, right? So I'm getting my money's worth. There are lots of close-ups and medium shots and long shots, right? So he is visually telling a story, but so many word balloons, so many gradients, like light sources on every, shoulder and piece of armor plating, and every time someone's got a little metallic anything on them, like that's got a highlight. I don't think Hi-Fi is doing Kurth a lot of favors. There's an ad in the back of issue 3 for another image book called The 10th Muse, and it's a cover of some other comic, and it's drawn by Roger Cruz, who's sort of famous for drawing a lot like Joe Madureira on Uncanny X-Men. And this image is seemingly colored by Paul Mounts. It doesn't look like him, but it's all flat. And all the colors are desaturated, right? There's a woman, it's a superhero team like running at us. And there are no gradients. And the background is a slightly yellowish off-white. And there is a place for my eye to rest in this cover. Not everything isn't sort of fighting and shouting with everything else. Sometimes less is more.
Okay, let's have one more point each, and then we'll move on. So, one last one from me was the Cobra Commander nightmare sequence. So this is a scene where Cobra Commander's, I think, locked up in his padded cell, and he's having hallucinations around being surrounded by cobras. There's Tomox and Zaymont with 2 heads, and then there's little miniature G.I. Joes in the top right and bottom left-hand corners, and it's drawn in quite an animated style. And it reminded me a little bit of a splash page from Batman Judge Dredd Judgment on Gotham by Simon Bisley, where he has a nightmare about cute things. One of my favorite panels ever, probably. One of my favorite things about the issue, just to do something a little bit brave and different, and to go for such a radically different panel splash page to the rest of the book.
I'll keep this short because I've talked so much. I'll just respond very quickly to that same splash page, Mark, you just mentioned. The sort of animation style, all these Joes and Cobras attacking Cobra Commander. It's a fun page visually. It's a lot of real estate for a comic that, 1, needs every page that it can get, and 2, is Cobra Commander's madness when Destro's thrown him in jail? Is that a big subplot here? I feel like in terms of writing, this is a page not well used, even if art-wise, it's a really fun image to look at. Jay?
I mean, that page is what it is. It kind of is a real stark contrast to the rest of the book. But if we're just doing one last point each, I want to say we've all kind of been pretty hard on this in a lot of ways, especially artistically, but we've also said that Kurth did improve over the course of the 4 issues. And there's one panel to me that really stuck out as a vast improvement of his that I wanted to mention. Think about when we reviewed issue 1 and the very first image of Baroness on the computer screen. Real high cheekbones, real narrow chin, the big ugly glasses. Now look at, I think it's the second page in issue 4, the very last panel, the news reporter. It's night and day. Her face is normal looking. Her eyes, everything is in proportion. It's a vast improvement from issue 1, and definitely I think the editor's right. I mean, there is some improvement that's gone through it, and like I said, we're hard on it a lot of times, but overall I liked it. The story, the 4 issues, more than it probably sounds like I did. I don't want us to feel like, or to sound like we're overly critical. They took on a lot, and they definitely improved as they went along.
And 10 or 15 years later, Steve Kurth draws a later G.I. Joe series, and he turns in great work.
Correct.
Okay. Do you have a last one from you, Tim?
I think my long rant about colors can be it. So I'll pass. Thanks.
Let's have a quick look at some G.I. Joe fashion.
Armani, Prada, Versace too. Joe's changed their outfits from black to blue. Duke and Hawk, look but don't gawk. Changing their kit, whoa, is that legit? Swapping camo jackets, headgear and boots. It's now neon colours and funky spacesuits. Sci-fi stalker and even roadblocks. While Bill, Flint and Mutt gave me a shock. So go take a walk if clothes aren't your passion, because it's comic book talk and lovely G.I. Joe fashion.
So there's a lot of new outfits, new looks, new characters to choose from. So let's hone in on just maybe one or two. I wanted to talk about Duke's new look, because there's, in issue 4, I think it is, there's quite a big reveal to it that on one of the pages, there's a quarter page splash, let's call it, that there's a reveal of Duke, and he's in a more military suit, more military outfit out of his black suit that he'd previously been wearing. The knee pads, the helmet, shoulder pads, etc. And then, saying, look at it, look at you, man of action, where's the monkey suit? And what was interesting about this is that it's, I think, one of the first pushes from Devil's Due to try and have their characters matching the figures that are coming out. So this look was based on a 2002 Duke from the range, where they didn't have their O-rings or sort of swivel joints or anything. It was it was the era of figures that is probably best forgotten, where you've got much less articulation. But that was the look from 2002 for that particular Duke.
Were those the ones that were packaged where it said G.I. Joe versus Cobra?
Yeah, that's right. And it was generally a double pack of a Joe and a Cobra being packaged together.
There's a toy helicopter in issue 3 or 4, right? That's also part of the toy line.
Yeah, I think
era.
Yeah, I think they call it the Wildfire in the issue, but it's also known as the Night Attack helicopter. And the first time it appears, it looks a little bit weird and insectoid, but as it appears subsequently, it looks a little bit more like the helicopter.
There's a letter in one of these issues where someone says, I don't like the design of that helicopter. It's too rounded, like modern, cars. It needs to be more squarish, like old school G.I. Joe vehicles. And then the person says, I guess that's just a design choice. So my comment on fashion will be how strange it is to see one of these really weird G.I. Joe vehicles from that middle era of toys that people have mixed feelings about in this comic, in this arc, which isn't trying very hard at all to incorporate G.I. Joe vehicles. There's no like all strikers. The Joes don't call any out. None of the pilots jump into any signature Joe planes. We see some hiss tanks, but they're sort of afterthoughts.
Yeah, interesting observation. Anything from you, Jay?
Yeah, I hadn't noticed that. Well, I mentioned Mainframe in the last episode. We really didn't see too much of him, other than a couple panels. In these 3, we really see where he's got like a full body jumpsuit almost, with all kinds of cables and things connected to him, and it's weird. I mean, it's like right out of the Matrix. I don't know. I mean, like I said with the last time, I feel like some of the redesigns are just kind of bland. A lot of it is inconsistent. Major Blood, you look at some of the panels with him, and it's kind of like his older, his original outfit, but there's just, they added too much in it. Yeah, I feel like that. I wish that they would have stuck more to the original designs. I realize that we're talking 5 or 7 years or whatever it is between then, and of course things are going to change. But there's, many of the characters are either just unexciting in the way they're presented, with their outfits, or just the opposite, bland. There was one thing that I noticed that I thought was really strange. I understand why they did it, but story-wise, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Snake Eyes and Snake Eyes and Scarlet, when they're held in the castle, they escape, and we talked about this earlier. They've got, I don't know, like white, and Snake Eyes has the bandage on his face. And then the next time we see them, they're quarantined in the G.I. Joe base, and they've both got their uniforms on. And I feel like, okay, so somebody brings them in, and they say, you guys need to be quarantined, but here, put your uniforms on while you're in quarantine. And it's like you guys talked about in another episode with Torpedo when they were in Fort Knox, and he comes in and he's got a full wetsuit on, including the flippers, and you just think, well, that's way out of place. So I can understand why they did it, but if you're trying to read it, I don't know. It's one of those things that took me out of it a lot.
Okay, let's move on to I Spy. Any little nuggets hidden away in the details?
I spy with my little eye.
Tim or Jay, was there anything that you wanted to spotlight?
This isn't a G.I. Joe thing. This is a comics thing. There are some sound effects which are drawn into the art, right? Mm-hmm. Like, kaboom or whomp when something explodes or someone gets punched. A lot of times, yeah. And at the end of, is it issue 3? There's a lightning strike behind Destro outside. And it's such a fun, great draw. Yeah, at the end of issue 3, Destro saying, activate the Gaijin satellite. Oh, so he's on a catwalk, and behind him is a window, and then we can see above and out him like purplish dark storm clouds. And there's a lightning strike, and then the word boom is drawn as like electric letters. And this is in the art. This is not computer lettering. And that's really fun. It doesn't work at the beginning of the issue when we go from Zanya and Zartan shooting some guards from blam, blam, blam to boom for this lightning strike, where it seems like Blaylock is trying to create like a film editing technique where you have one sound become another and you like cut from one shot to another. And you can't really replicate that in comics. And even though J. Scott Campbell didn't draw the insides of this issue, it brings me back to his Wildsiders comic, where in the first couple pages, he literally draws a panel of a record player. And like the sound effect is like a record scratch, as if he's alluding to this like popular culture, like film trailer technique where like someone says something and then we hear a record scratch and then everyone like stops. And it's like funny or embarrassing, and the moment changes. And it's like, no, sound effects can do certain things in comics, but we can't hear them. So I like the use of sound effects in the G.I. Joe in this arc, except for this blam blam boom lightning sort of graphic match cut.
Very good. Anything from you, Jay?
Not anything for particular for I Spy, and I'll admit I didn't even notice the boom and the lightning behind Destro in that panel.
Yeah, it's good. I like it.
Maybe to their credit, I was into the story, and I was just kind of going along, and I wanted to see what happened next.
The one I spotted was using real-life politicians. So there was a reference, I think, to Donald Rumsfeld in issue 1, and then in issue 4, we had the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives and future convicted felon Dennis Hastert, who was convicted for financial crimes related to paying hush money to cover up repeated incidents of child molestation. He became the highest-ranking elected official in the US history to have served a prison sentence.
Quote of the week, 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 quote of the week.
I did have a favorite line of dialogue. I believe it's in issue 4, as Cobra are delivering supplies to the Midwest. You get a caption where Destro is explaining his plan, and he says, "Their fears are quelled when a friendly masked soldier or gruff but kind dreadnought hands them a gift." I just don't think I've ever heard dreadnoughts described as gruff but kind.
I think of that line as suggesting more to these scenes where Cobra is like winning the hearts and minds of all these Americans who like don't have power or don't have food.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a thing that works really well. That idea works really well in this comic, and I wish they could spend a little more time with it. It's like, no, your society is not functioning. Well, we've got Cobra trucks ready to deliver. You know, there's that panel of a little girl with a teddy bear and an Iron Grenadier. Is handing her?
That's right.
Something.
Yeah, it was like 2
issue 4.
pages, and that was it.
It frustrated me a little bit because they show like one truck, you know, handing out some stuff and, you know, hint at some other things. But it's like, you know, America is a big country. What, you know, the logistics to actually distribute aid to enough of the country that would make a difference in terms of winning hearts and minds seems like a big thing to carry off, particularly if you're having to capture and shoot soldiers each time to do it.
When you have the shorthand of nanites, I guess you can also have we took over the country in 4 pages. Well, we can also save the country in 2 pages.
Efficient. Okay. Right, let's put ourselves in positions of power as we become the editors.
Talking Joe is editing. What changes will we think? Rearrange all sorts of things like covers. The script is in the air, correcting everywhere, wielding the red pen of change. Devil's Due, our moment to comment, make it right, where we can make the book our way. We're wielding change, we're editing.
So let's get this out of the way. Hopefully I'll be able to cover off Tim's point in a more succinct way. The lettering is terrible again, particularly on issue 2. There was that page that Tim was talking about earlier where Duke is doing a lot of talking, and there are just square boxes segueing into round speech bubbles, and it's just overcrowded and looking horrible. And you know, so only so much of that can be fixed, but by editing the way that the letters look, more can be done by possibly cutting down the dialogue and trying to keep it to what is actually, you know, essential to have on the page. And what was interesting is that it does seem to improve with issue 3, and with issue 3 there is a credited letterer credited as Dreamer Design. So it does seem to improve, and I wonder if that has something to do with it.
If you want to put on your graphic designer hat, if you have the issues in front of you, not the collection, open up issue 4 and count the number of different fonts on the inside front cover, and you will have a suggestion of why lettering and design for this comic got away from the creative team. If I'm going to put on my editor hat and change one thing, I would run my whole letter in issue 3.
Very good. Jay, anything from you?
I think for me, it would just be a lot of the pacing. Like Tim said earlier, they seem to cram a lot into every page. And then, as I mentioned, when we get to the battle and the final battle in issue 4, all the panels almost are just, the camera is right up on the characters. And you move from this character interacting with this character. The scene, we'll call it, cuts to a different couple characters. And again, it's just close up on these characters. There's not a lot of pullback. Let's look at the big picture and see what's going on. And the whole series is kind of like that as a whole. There's just, they crammed more in here than I think they needed to. And I think an editor could have hopefully said, let's take some breathing room every once in a while.
Pare back on some of the CD plots and focus in on the main stuff. Yeah, big firm agree. So we've got to the end of the 4 issues. Let's have a Joeage out of 10. What would our rating be? Let Jay, why don't you go first?
Oh, why do I have to be first? Well, like I said, I feel like, again, I'm repeating myself. I got to give these guys credit for trying it. Larry's huge shoes, not like Destro's. There's big shoes to fill. It's a property that we all love, and they took it on. Whatever we might think about their efforts, I have to give them credit for that. And I think, and I've also said this, I enjoyed it more than I thought that I would. That said, there's a lot of faults. I'm going to kind of go back to what Chief always says. Anything above a 5 means I don't regret reading it. So I'm going to give it a 6.5.
Okay, good. I agree with most of that. I think there are certainly flaws. I don't know that I particularly enjoyed reading some of it when it was just getting super dense, but I wholeheartedly respect what they did, and I certainly did enjoy it at the time. I'm going to give it, I think, a 5.5, just because of the issues with the plotting and some of particularly the earlier art and the pacing, but with an optimism that things are going to get better.
Now Tim's going to come in and drop a 3.
I'm going to come in and drop a 4.
I wasn't too far off.
This is merely competent, right? This is not incompetent. There are characters. I can follow the story. It gets hard at the end. Too much is going on. I don't think it's too harsh to say these are all amateurs, but I don't think they were quite professional yet across the board. This isn't like a self-published creator-owned thing where the stakes are much lower. This is G.I. Joe. This is a multi-$100 million brand.
Yeah.
And I would expect Hasbro to be harder on the people making this, and the people making this to be more rigorous with their own abilities.
It's a good point.
And next time we will read more of the book. We will be reading issue 5, and we'll also be discussing the Data Files specials, which were launched as a tie into this. And I think there is some adverts for them in the back of the book.
It's the inside back cover of 4.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, inside back cover of 4. We've got more David Michael Beck art, this time advertising their first spin-off, which was Battle Files. So similar to the Order of Battle that we had from Marvel back in the day. And so, we'll be delving into that and discussing some of the art and some of the features of that book. And then after that, we will be on full pelt as we go through the issues, covering an arc at a time. So, 5 was a bit of a standalone, which is why we're just going to cover that off on a one-off episode. And otherwise, we'll be covering 3 to 4 issues at a time and covering an entire arc. So looking forward to that. And interestingly enough, Tim, I think you said you dropped off around about issue 10, and I think it was that point it really started picking up. So I'm looking forward to getting past that point and getting into the meat of some of those more interesting stories once we're past this opener. And let's move on to the next segment, which is my quiz, all about if something was true or false, also known as Devil's True or Devil's Poo. Devil's true, 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 or poo, poo, poo is all I want to know right now. True, 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 or poo, poo, poo. Let's find out the answers right now. So the first one, you might have noticed on the last pages of some of these issues, I think it says to be continued in 60. So first few issues were running bi-monthly. And the reason for that was that Image insisted that the book could only be published bi-monthly. Devil's True or Devil's Poo? Jay?
I'm going to say poo. And I don't really have anything to back that up other than possibly the fact that these guys are new, it's their first effort, and that they might want to try to take a little more time between issues.
Okay, interesting. You are wrong. No, it was true. And so the Image insisted that it be bi-monthly initially, and this was possibly because of the Image founders' own difficulties in keeping to a regular schedule. That they thought these new punks coming on board protect them a little bit and try and get them to a bi-monthly, prove that they've got what it takes to do that first before over-promising and under-delivering. They quickly realised that actually this was Image's #1 selling book, and maybe it wouldn't be such a good idea to hold that back. But Blaylock is still upset at all of the revenue that was missed out on because of this rule that Image initially insisted on.
Oh, interesting.
Tim Seeley was approached for the book, but he said that he wasn't ready yet and recommended that his friend Steve Kurth take on the art duties instead. Tim?
That sounds plausible. I haven't read this, but I'll say true.
It's plausible because it's true. Yep. Tim Seeley did indeed come onto the book at a later stage, but initially said no and pointed to Steve Kurth to take it on instead. The relationship with Hasbro was good, and they had some great suggestions that were incorporated into the book. Jay?
I'm going to say that's probably true. Like we talked about with getting the Duke in there, with the action figure accurate costume, and the inclusion of the wildfire helicopters.
It's false, I'm afraid. Josh Blaylock describes that working for Hasbro was a nightmare. He said they didn't know who Snake Eyes was. They couldn't understand that it wasn't for 5-year-olds. Whereas, their publishing strategy was to aim it as for a more nostalgic audience of the 20s and 30s who had read the book as kids. And they would come up with questions like, why are you including Hell's Angels, a dominatrix, and a pimp in the book? Not realizing that the Dreadnoks, Destro, and Baroness were actually main characters of the franchise.
There have been years where Hasbro has been, more on the ball with its own brands, and there have been years where Hasbro was very much into licenses like Star Wars and Indiana Jones and the Marvel characters. And in those years, the core brands like G.I. Joe and Transformers don't get as much love. Yeah,
and I think, unfortunately, the contacts that they were given at particular points for the leads in Hasbro simply didn't know the brand well enough to really add value and understand what it was about.
I've heard plenty of stories of, especially at Toy Fair, when Hasbro would bring properties and the people that were there displaying the properties really had no idea what they were talking about. Fans would ask them questions. Are we going to see this figure? Are we going to see this figure? And the people from Hasbro were just clueless. So, yeah, I can believe that.
Next one. Marvel had proposed a G.I. Joe X-Men crossover. Tim?
Oh, wow. Well, there was an X-Men Star Trek crossover.
There was.
That Mark Silvestri drew. So this feels possible, but if I'm assuming that this question is sort of around this time period.
I think it would be.
In which case, I'm going to say not true.
So, unfortunately for you, it is true.
Oh,
it was
wow.
indeed proposed by Marvel, and I think, as you say, it was probably around that same era the Star Trek crossover happened. It was turned down for two reasons. Firstly, that they didn't think that it fit with the G.I. Joe brand. And the second one is that because of this sort of slightly fractious relationship with Hasbro, that Blaylock was somewhat nervous that the crossover would be a big success and it would be used as a somewhat of an anvil that they could be hit with to show, look what can happen if you give the license to a bigger, more established player like Marvel. You could have a big success that sells much higher than the regular book with those punks over at Devil's Due.
That's fascinating. There were plenty of Marvel and Image crossovers in the late 90s and early 2000s, and that were not very good, even if it's sort of exciting that someone wanted to do it and that there were exciting writers and artists. And I feel like I have to agree with the logic here that it's not a good fit. Like the fan in me wants to see it, but once I start thinking about it, like, no, the X-Men like fly and they shoot force beams out of their eyes. Like what are you going to have a G.I. Joe character do?
Yeah, absolutely. So there we go. We'll have more Pooh or True next time. And now we'll pass the baton over to Jay for some toy talk.
Mark talks about toys, ho ho. He talks about G.I. Joe. He talks about all the toys from the comic book and the animated show. Mark talks about toys. Mark talks about toys.
All right. The character that I want to talk about, the toy I want to talk about, is Destro, since he did play such a big part in these issues. And I kind of told Tim last night, we were talking about it a little bit. What I'd like to do is maybe compare the original figure of Destro to the recently released Classified. Now, the Classified Destro seems to be one of fans' favorite figures from the line so far. And I feel like a part of that is because it is so faithful to the original. The original Destro was almost completely clad in black. He had silver gauntlets, one with 3 grenades on it and the other with 3 rockets. Of course, he had the iconic open shirt, the big red disco collar, and the silver mask. And then he's got a red pistol holster on his leg. The Classified figure is almost a mirror image of that. There's very few differences. The only difference is his boots are gray. He's got gray knee pads on. The belt is gray. He still has the red holster on his leg. He still has the gauntlets, although one doesn't have grenades. One still has the rockets. He's still got the disco collar, the open shirt, the gold medallion. He does have a few more spotlighted parts. He's got some gray pads here and there. But overall, it's very, very similar to the original figure. Now, the original figure was kind of thick around the waist. And I don't know, it looks strange. I'm looking at a picture of it right now from Mark Bellamo's book. And, the legs are kind of tapered towards the ankles. I don't know. It's a little bit blocky. But the new figure, the Classified, is just a gorgeous figure. Proportionally designed, the scale of the figure, the musculature. It's really a great update, and it's one that I was very happy to get. And I think most people that are buying these would agree. And a lot of people, like I said, have said this is their favorite figure from the line. You guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, wouldn't disagree with any of that. I think it was a great reinterpretation on that Classified, keeping all of those distinctive details from the V1 and just sort of enhancing it, really, sort of just adding to textures but not to the extent that it's noodling and taking away from that silhouette color sort of accents that identify what Destro, the essence of Destro.
Kind of like we talked about with the redesign of the characters in the book. It's still very faithful to the original without going too far away from the original concept. It's updated a little bit. One nice thing about it, the original Destro had a backpack that opened up, and his pistol fit really nicely in there. The original backpack looked like it had like an M16 inside that was broken down. The new figure has an attaché case. You open it up, and there's a laptop with a screen inside. Oddly, it has a Cobra logo on it, and so does the case itself. And I say that because, as we know, Destro is supposed to be Mars, not necessarily Cobra. Now, the pistol that he comes with doesn't fit in here, and that's kind of disappointing. Now, like a lot of the Classified figures, though, he does have, with the red holster on his leg, he comes with a gold pistol that's removable that fits perfectly in that. And I suppose you could put that in the backpack, but there's no reason to since it fits on his holster.
But the black one can fit in his holster as well, and then you can stick the
does
gold
it?
one in.
I haven't tried putting it in there.
Yeah.
One nice thing about the case that opens up, and it looks like one side of it is full of money, which is kind of cool if you think, well, he's a weapons supplier, so it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility for him to be walking around with an attaché case full of money. So yeah, like I said, it's a great figure. If you're into the Classified lines, it's definitely one that you've got to get.
Agree. And some interesting new Destro figures announced just this last week, sort of
the
using
12-inch
that
Mezco statue, I
same
think.
sort of design.
Yeah, and it might be exactly like the Classified line. I haven't looked at it real close, but I've heard some other people talking about it, and they seem to imply that it's basically this version and not necessarily the original.
Very good. So with Toy Talk done, we are able to move on to G.I. Joe merchandise, and Tim is going to unveil another little nugget for us.
You know, G.I. Joe ain't just toys, funny books, and tunes. Those guys will license anything. So funky, so nice, G.I. Joe merchandise. Do you need it? Sure you do. It's G.I. Joe branded, fool. What shall we make? We can't decide. Pick some old crap and put Flint's face on the side. On the side. T-shirts, funkers, stickers, shampoo, lunchbox, soap, jackets, underoos. Yeah, that's right. I said underoos. Badges, brushes, combs and mugs, telephones, tissues, and probably hugs. Hot damn. G.I. Joe hugs? Radios, candy, tents, tattoos. With a G.I. Joe logo, they just can't lose. Door knocker, doorbell, even doormat. They'll probably brand your dog and your cat. So funky, so nice, it's G.I. Joe merchandise. Do you need it? Sure you do. It's G.I. Joe branded, fool. What shall we make? We can't decide. Pick some old crap and put Flint's face on the side. It's G.I. Joe merchandise.
Whoa! Crikey.
All right, so I am playing the 1993 G.I. Joe Star Brigade. Oof, let me turn off the sound. The Tiger electronic handheld game. Tiger made a whole bunch of these in the early 90s. They have a very small screen and a relatively large plastic casing around it, so there's like room for marquee art around the screen. It's liquid crystal display like your old Casio digital watch. You play as Duke, and you only play as Duke. And the sort of color imprinted image underneath the black character art that lights up is a cratered surface of perhaps a moon. You can move left and right. And when you move left or right, and then you move left a second time or right a second time, you fire from your blaster. There's a call button, and one of 3 or 4 other Joe characters from Star Brigade will show up on the sides, and there's a jump character. These games, my brother had 1 or 2 of the Tiger games. I think we had the licensed like Streets of Rage or Street Fighter, and none of them worked. I mean, technically, physically they work, but sort of as entertaining gameplay, they were all way too loud. It would hurt my ears. And the available sort of space on this like 1.5 by 1.5 screen, and these sort of pre-printed templates where your character can show up, where a blast can show up, where a villain can show up. You know, this isn't like Game Boy, where you have all these tiny pixels that construct your image and you can sort of move wherever according to the program. You can only move in certain places here. So the gameplay in all of the Tiger games, not just the licensed ones, was super limited, not fun. These felt like they were aimed at really young kids, like 5 and 6. And I was always surprised when I saw someone older playing with one, including myself. And then after 5 minutes, I'd think, well, this isn't fun. I'm going to stop playing. But as a piece of G.I. Joe merchandise, as the toy line was winding down and then canceled, this was really novel to me and sort of valuable. I'll just read to you 1 or 2 sentences from the instruction manual. Instruction manual is a small white pamphlet, and all of the words and images are printed in sort of magenta. Cobra has recognized that to further their goal of conquering the world, they must leave the world as we know it. So under the leadership of evil mastermind Destro, they are building a military base on the moon in order to launch an all-out galactic attack on Earth. Are you ready to join the G.I. Joes? Good. The objective of the game is for you to control the G.I. Joes and their G.I. Joe armor bots to defeat Cobra and their leader, Destro. You always play as Duke. You must try to complete your mission of defeating Cobra and their leader, Destro. There is a timer to give you a sense of how much time remains in each stage. this is fun for 2 minutes, and then you realize it's sort of hard and not fun. It takes 2 AA batteries, and I own 2. One still mint sealed, and one that I took out of the package at the time. Haven't played it since 1993, just for this podcast. And I believe I got these at the Woolworths at my local suburban shopping mall, which did have G.I. Joe figures in 93 as the line was winding down.
Very good. And have you been on eBay to see how much your sealed one is worth?
He can probably get a classified figure for what that's worth.
You think?
All right, I'm hopping onto eBay. Right, G.I. Joe Star Brigade, Tiger Star Brigade. Whoa! There's one for sale, pre-owned, for $150.
Wow!
And none others. I'm guessing this was produced in small quantities, and that if it didn't sell, these were returned or junked or whatever happens to unsold merchandise at a store like Woolworths. Let me try a second search. G.I. Joe Tiger Electronic.
Okay, well, if you sell that, you can get a Cobra Viper from the classified line off eBay.
Is that what they're going for?
They're really expensive, yeah.
Geez, I feel like I should just post a YouTube video of a playthrough. Like, I should set up my camera and you can see my thumbs hitting these 4 buttons and watch me play this game for 6 minutes. Maybe I'll get a bunch of hits if I do that. I'm not going to do this. I'm just thinking it'd be a good idea.
6 minutes? You said it stopped being fun after 2.
If I knew people were watching, the goal would be to get sort of every little variation of the graphics to appear. It's like, well, if I go up on the top right and I call, maybe rock and roll shows up. And if I go up on the bottom left and I hit the call button, the armor bot shows up. $150. Nice.
It's interesting to me that they had Destro be the leader of Cobra in that. I wonder why they did that.
I think it's because, correct me if I'm wrong, his Star Brigade figure came out before Cobra Commanders. I think it's just sort of timing, like what figures were in the line that year.
Probably no okay. Cobra Commander, right? But that art of Destro in the Star Brigade is nice, and obviously they recycled some Michael Golden-esque poses for Destro in it. It's a nice image, if nothing else. But yeah, if that video doesn't exist, I think it should, and I think you should be the man to make it happen, Tim.
If our tens of thousands of new listeners that have come to the podcast since I told Facebook and the internet that I've joined Talking Joe, if there's enough demand, I can set up a lamp and my camera, and I can sit and I can be near some ambient light by a window, and maybe I'll just take a couple seconds and send it to you, Mark, for you to put into the inevitable YouTube version of this podcast.
So with that done, we can quickly move on to everyone, and particularly Tim's favorite segment. It's Innuen-Joe.
This is how the story goes. Attention. At this moment, you are now listening to
Talking Innuen-Joe.
If you are offended by words like
Sucking, flesh wound. Willy, Pete. Balls, crystal balls. Hypno shield.
whatever, take the tape out now. This is not a pop album. And by the way, suck my
Grandmother's brick in a Prada handbag.
So, as a reminder, if you're in the right frame of mind, and specifically my frame of mind, some of the G.I. Joe names can sound a little bit dirty. Can I get through a list of 10 rude sounding G.I. Joe names without making my co-hosts titter to give me some validation, or guffaw, in which case I will win? So let's go. Double blast. Tim is on mute. I
was about to say, Tim, let's put our game faces on here.
Sorry.
Cannot laugh.
Okay. Sorry. I am prepared. I will not. I don't find Double Blast funny or not funny. It's just a Joe name.
Okay.
I find it disappointing because it should be Roadblock.
Okay. Double blast. Headman. Headhunters. Heavy duty. Duty?
You win.
I'm smiling, but I'm not making. I think you put your thumb on the scale, Mark, with pronouncing that T like a D.
It's the way I always pronounce it. It's just my pronunciation.
I snickered at Headman, honestly, but I don't think you heard it.
That name just makes me think of his amazing death scene in the animated series.
Headman?
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
He ODs on his own drugs.
Oh my gosh.
Own supply.
Wow.
Oh, man. Okay, so with heavy duty, let's leave. I said it's just the way I say it. Let's leave that there. So next time on Talking Joe, we will be covering issue 178, which is an Arctic special. Woo, they're in the snow and everything. So that will be your homework for next time. And then in a fortnight's time, that's 2 weeks, you'll be back here for a discussion of issue 5 and the data files. And that might mean that we can keep this under 2 hours. Ooh. And then beyond that, we'll be covering arcs at a time. So if you want to read ahead, that's what we'll be doing. You can find us in all of the usual places. talkingjoe.co.uk is the website that has all of those places. The podcast links, the Twitters, the Instagrams, and the YouTubes. And of course, as well, a link to our email. So remember to like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening to this, and let us know what you think. And see you next time. Where can people find you, Tim?
See rare G.I. Joe art and paperwork at arealamericanbook.com.
Bingo. And Jay, you've just launched a place where people can find your stuff.
Yeah, on Facebook, actually, it's Break Room Sketches. And real quick, I explained this on the page. When I started doing the Break Room Sketches, there were several people that would like them all the time, and as I was starting to do them, I would try to tag those people in, when I would do a sketch, and it just got to be too many people. And a lot of times I'm literally drawing right up to the last second. And so the other day I decided, well, I'm going to make a list, and then that way I can just, finish a sketch, click the list, boom, everybody that likes them generally is going to get to see it. I didn't necessarily mean to create an entire page out of it, but it worked. And I thought, if I get 20 people to join, that'll be really cool. And by the time I was done writing my first message, when I closed out of that, I already had 23 people join up. Here I am a day later, and I've got over 100 members. So it's
Bingo.
pretty exciting.
Very good. So yeah, you can go see, if you're not yet following that page, you can go over there and see Jay's art. A lot of good stuff happening over there. So when all is said and done, you can catch us down the road.
Because we've been talking Joe.
And we're all out of Joes.
Laters.
Bye.